with Microsoft, and seeing the value that conversation can bring alongside learning management. I'm going to take a little bit of a slightly different tack over the next little while, and going to run a conversation with a couple of leading higher education providers across Asia. My name's Myles Carrick. I look after customers for the Canvas learning management system. But hopefully what you'll be hearing more from whom you'll be hearing more from is Dr. Carol Enriquez, President of Our Lady of Fatima University in the Philippines. I want to welcome you, Dr. Carol.
Hi, Myles. How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you. And Nick Noakes, who's the Associate Director of the Centre for Education Innovation at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Hi, Nick.
Everybody.
Great to have you with us. And congratulations, Nick, to Hong Kong UST on the number 5 ranking announced this evening. It's great to have two organisations with really different profiles. One that's much longer and been video that you shared. My colleagues are going to be popping that in the chat for those who'd love to get a bit of background on both Hong Kong UST and on Our Lady of Fatima University. The institution has been working with LMSs for a long time with HKUST and a much newer organisation to working with online and blended learning with OLFU. If you have any questions, feel free to discuss them in the chat. If there are specific questions, please pop them in the Q&A. I've got a couple of my colleagues from Instructure who'll be helping support us there, and I'll try and direct those to our guests as we go. But it's a bit of a lead-in to it. You'll see the title that we suggested for our session was about accelerating transformation, and I wonder if that's something that resonates with you. We find that in Instructure that lots of organisations, maybe your institution is like this, have been talking about online, distance, blended modes for some time, and what the opportunity are, what opportunities there might be. And we've been doing interesting things for a long time. And the COVID period has given us an insight into really doing that at scale. It's forced many of us into some outside of our comfort zone, and given us an opportunity to try some new things, as hard as it has been. And I wonder if that's something that does resonate with you. And I wonder, Nick, if I might start with you and just sharing a little bit of some of the strategies that you've had at Hong Kong UST. And really, you started it maybe a little bit earlier than some of us.
Yeah, just a little bit. We had to start in November because of protests in Hong Kong. But the main strategies I think that we've used is sort of 2 or 3 main ones. One was to sort of get faculty development and training in very early, because we sort of quickly decided we were going to do live synchronous sessions for all our courses and all our curriculum. And then we sort of backed that up with having centralized support for teaching and learning for faculty particularly, so which included a 24/7 hotline and as well as email. So there's actually a phone hotline as well for people, which got used a lot, I must admit. So I sort of shout out, I think, to instructional designers and those sort of people around the world who've probably been working very, very hard during that time. So and with COVID since then. So the training also was actually our training initial training was actually led by the Associate Provost for Teaching and Learning. So I think the fact that senior management actually led that first training. And normally we might, if we've got a normal session, it might be 50 people, but for the training sessions that we did for like Zoom and things like that, we actually had over 90% of the faculty attended. We had multiple sessions, but you're talking about over 650 people attending those sessions instead of the usual 50. We had them in sort of sessions of about 120 to up to 200 people in one session is what we had. So I think that lead. I think the second thing we did, that more with students but partly with faculty, is that we opened up a regular communication channel. So we had what we called a one-button feedback, that both faculty and students could push something in every time, and we were monitoring that every every evening and then replying to them to sort out the problems. So that went on the whole semester. And then we also collected survey data from the students about 3 or 4 weeks in and about halfway through, and then at the end of the semester as well. So those were I think the main sort of things that we did that helped us to move it all forward fairly smoothly. They were the sort of strategies we were using.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, you mentioned there about how valuable it is to have support from the top. And Dr. Carroll, at Our Lady of Fatima, there was support from the Office of the President all the way down. Can you speak to us a bit about some of what's transpired for you over the period of the last few months, and what some of the strategies have been that you've adopted?
Well, the last few months have really been a story to tell for most of us, I'm guessing. But looking back, the first thing we did in the university was to regroup, start brainstorming, and then we had to mobilize the entire team. Because as you know, we were just in the middle of populating our Canvas, our LMS, and right in the middle of everything, all the changes, we had to ramp up. So since we were at the last stretch of the semester, immediately we had to consider, how do we close the semester? So what we did was to just close it based on class standing. And then in the interim, what we did was to double up the content of our learning management system. And then we were working on the premise that there's no other alternative but to go fully online. So initially, our LMS was meant to be just a supplement for in case classes are called off, then we go use our LMS. But since everything has been very fluid and we had to operate within the guidelines on quarantines and certain conditions, we had to make our planning very rigid and at the same time flexible. So what I mean by flexible, we had from the onset 3 sets of plans. So we didn't know whether we should go when we can open up. So we said, okay, we start with plan A to plan B to plan C with different sets of activities. But our overall game plan was to populate our LMS so that in the end, it could be really fully full-time online delivery. So we had to recalibrate our curriculum content, think about the duration of the video uploads, reconfigure assessments, and to make sure that our backend technical support is aligned with our front-end needs. At the same time also, we did a lot of teacher retraining and upgrading of teacher skills so that we can maximize the tools that were embedded in our LMS system. So now we're doing plan A, B, C. Now we're in plan Y. We still don't know the iteration of how things will go in terms of when classes will fully open, but by August, when we're allowed to have our classes, we're ready. And that's because of the use of our LMS, which we found to be very useful, especially now that there's a lot of students who are worried about going into online education.
Mm. I wonder if we can, if you wouldn't mind just dwelling on that a bit more for us, Carol, around what the student experience has been. Have students shared how they have experienced it? What have been some of the challenges that you've faced there with the student experience?
Well, I'm coming from the Philippines, where basically we're a developing country. A lot of our students have no internet access at home. So we have to be very careful with the kinds of videos that upload, including the lectures that we have to deliver. So we have to think about how much can 1 gigabyte, how much can we use from 1 gigabyte? So we had to make our studies, we had to work with our telecommunication companies so that our students could be given special packages in terms of Wi-Fi access. Otherwise, the whole system will not work. Without the internet access of our students, then we could not deliver our online studies. So what we did was we talked to the different telecommunication firms and we asked for special rates. And well, they did help, but we still have to be very mindful with how much we put in our content, how much we populate it, how long can we deliver our lectures, and how do we do our schedulings. Because as you know, Myles, I operate 6 campuses. And most of the time, we consider whether we're going to do synchronous studies, asynchronous, or something else. because the student expectations is very high, coming from a very traditional way of delivering education. So I think the students feel that they should have more of the lectures synchronously. But if I do that, then I have to be able to weigh and mitigate how do I control the data usage, especially if I run like 6 subjects in a semester. So we're doing a lot of heavy experimenting. This June 8th, we're opening our summer classes for about, we're looking at 4,000 students.
Wow.
Well, it might be harder come August when we're looking, we had a population base of around 50,000 students last semester. So we don't know how many of the students will come back, but we have to prepare for that number of students just in case all of them will decide to come back. And if they do, we have to be ready. We have to be ready with the schedules. We have to be ready with the content. We have to be ready with the assessments, because a lot of students are asking, how are we going to be graded? Especially if you're coming from the traditional way, quizzes, long tests, and everything else. So from the front end and the back end, everything has to gel and to be fixed in time for classes. So there's really a lot of work, and I'm happy that we engaged with our LMS Canvas earlier on. Otherwise, it would be a big headache for everyone, I'm sure. Unlike Nick over there, he's pretty much settled. We're doing it first time around.
I wonder, Nick, does it feel though like you're very much settled? I think we were all several steps down the path, but it wasn't anywhere near the number of steps we needed. Carol mentioned there a couple of things. One was the student expectation around synchronous communication and what that looked like, and even the student expectation around assessment, what form and format assessment would take. Wonder if you can speak a little on the HKUST experience on those kinds of things and student experience and how you're wrestling with that.
The synchronous one first. I'll do the assessment one second, but on the synchronous one, I think it was still an issue. 20 for us in the sense that 20% of our undergrads and 80% of our postgrads are not from Hong Kong, and most of them had returned. In fact, the 80% of postgrads mostly from mainland China, and they had actually already returned home before COVID for Chinese New Year. So they ended up stuck in mainland China too and couldn't come back. So, and the 20% of the undergrads often had returned home because of the protests initially really in Hong Kong. So most of them are from Southeast Asia, so South Korea, Indonesia, Philippines, too, places like that as well. So, time difference, some of them are in the States too, or Europe. So time differences for synchronous classes online became an issue. We had a few students who were taking their classes at like 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. So, that was sort of the main issue. We also had, at the beginning, we had a real issue with students not wanting to turn their cameras on as well. So that was quite noticeable. And then that changed over time. That was interesting as they got more sort of interactive with each other. But especially if you put them into like breakout groups and they were doing group work, then the cameras would come on, and they would complain to their peers if their cameras didn't come on, because they really wanted to see people when they were in smaller groups. In the big class, it didn't matter as much. It mattered to the teachers, but less to the students, I would say. But so it changed over the semester. I still think we're learning. With the assessment, I still think that's sort of one of the big challenges, I think, still going forward. We've tried to shift faculty to think about alternative forms of assessment, which in itself is actually an opportunity. So to get away from more traditional exams, to think about other things. And Jason was just mentioning about using teams and doing projects and things like that. So that type of thing, was something you would do, an assignment or a project with a group, other things, but maybe even open book exams, for example, and more of those and that sort of thing. So it has pushed us. I think it's still a real challenge to do that in terms of, you look at academic integrity a lot and robustness in doing that when we're doing it. So I don't think we've got any of the we've solved that problem by any stretch of the imagination. I think the biggest opportunity is to try and shift assessment practices to a large extent, to be truthful with it. So that's our main challenge. I do want to say though, I think the students have, as well as the faculty, the students have responded incredibly well. They've sort of rolled with it really well, and they've persisted and been resilient, and that's probably not just true of us. I suspect that's true in Caroline's institution too, and probably all over. On the whole, the students have really sort of gone with it, and they know that everybody's trying their best to make things work as well as we can. So.
And it's an interesting question, isn't it, about the what the driver is on assessment and student expectations and our understanding about grading and the reporting and the credentialing that goes with that. I can't think of a time where I've been part of so many conversations about the move to pass or fail grades. From previous structures where I know even in large Australian universities that are talking about implementing large scale moves to pass or fail, which is
certainly didn't do that. So I mean, some of the courses went to pass and fail, but it was more on a case by case basis, not large scale. Carol, was that the same? What did you?
No, well, there's it's different how we did it in the Philippines. So some schools went ahead, pushed for mass promotions. But in my university, there's no way we're going to do mass promotions because we felt that you have to earn your grades correctly. So we had to consider really assessments and how to do assessments, especially now moving forward. We're thinking about what's a percentage for each exam? What's a percentage for the quiz? And do we give more weight for performance assessments? And what are the forms of performance assessments that must be done? So there's been a lot of debates among the faculty heads as well as the deans on what's the best way to configure assessments for the students. And then we thought, well, considering that everything now is outcomes-based, we really have to consider performance assessments as forming a big bulk of the grades of the students. So we're tweaking a lot of our curriculum so that we can deliver it that way. But another challenge that we have, Myles, would be changing the mindsets of our parents and students, because they believe that online is something else, it's different. It might not give you the full experience, which is actually in a way true. But we were saying that at this point in time, online education is the only way to go. We can make it very interesting for you by enhancing the curricular content, as well as making sure that everything is different and interesting for the students. But what I've been doing lately is attending webinars with all my potential students and engaging them on what are their issues with regards to online education. And it's true, it is still the internet connection. That's a big problem with them, and the cost. Because if you deliver like a 2-hour lecture, that's easily like 3 gigabytes. So we have to configure really on a big scale, how do we deliver education synchronously or asynchronously? We're still working on that. Hopefully we get our solutions through shared experiences with other institutions that have been doing online studies for quite some time already.
Yeah, you talk there about tweaking the curriculum. I know that the history, the origins of Our Lady of Fatima is as a medical school, in health sciences. And if I think back at some of the sessions earlier today as part of this conference, a recurring theme in the questions in the chat has been about practical subjects. How will you handle laboratory work? How will you handle practicum? What does that look like? That's a big one.
Well, we have to stretch our imagination. So what we're doing right now is a lot of my teachers are doing videos of how to conduct experiments. And then we expect the students to be able to do the return demonstrations given by just going through the steps. They may not have the equipment at the time, but what we are telling them is make it clear that as you go through the steps, people understand the reasons behind each step. So there's a lot of shooting going on in campus for the videos. But then again, we have to be very mindful of the duration of each video that we put up. So mindful of the expenses on the part of the students. So that's one, we're doing videos. And the other one is we have our virtual laboratories. So again, just to be able to carry out the lectures, it has to be through videos.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard.
Yeah, and I think those unique challenges, or distinctive challenges, I know they're not unique, but they're certainly distinctive to the Philippines experience. Before we move on and talk about next steps, Nick, I wonder if you can just touch on that, like the extent to which, you know, curriculum has really needed to change, or you've needed to wrestle with immovable objects, you know, in the way that some courses need to be delivered. Is that something that you've faced?
Yeah, in the sense as Caroline. I think the practicum, the courses that have some sort of practicum involved, whether the practicum is a laboratory, but I mean in some of the other subjects, it could be a field trip, you know, like in engineering, civil engineering or something like that. So I think for the sort of labs, then there's sort of some alternatives that we're looking into and trying. So, you know, some of it is simulations. Some of it is actually sort of giving the data and then working on the end part of the laboratory experiment. And even I know in the States in MIT 10 or 15 years ago, they actually started to do remote labs, you know, so labs where you could control the experiments remotely. You know, you've got a technician in there who's at least supplying, you know, the chemicals or whatever that you need to do something. So we're having to look at those, but I don't think we've got, you know, great solutions right now. So I'd love to hear what people who are in the chat, what they're doing to sort of try and deal with the practicum side of any curriculum, right? Whatever it is, because that happens in the arts too. I mean, we've got people in the arts who are, you know, who do field visits as well, and in sciences and engineering and in business. Or if you're working with NGOs, say, or something like that, or a company, you know, some sort of joint project with a commercial or non-commercial company, then, you know, how do we deal with those in this situation? You know, so you learn a lot from those. I don't think I'd say we've got answers right now. So.
You know, we're lucky. We have our new facility where we have most of our virtual labs in one building. So we're able to simulate a lot of our return demonstrations, especially for the parapractical subjects. So we have, well, just recently, our College of Medicine showed their students doing their return demo on suturing, how to suture, how to deliver babies even, using our virtual simulations. But then it's different. Hands-on versus virtual simulation, it's different, but virtual simulation helps a lot for the students to be able to conceptualize and to understand better how the process goes.
Yep. Yes, I was with my wife as she went through medical school. I can't imagine what that would be looking like to support her through virtual medical school. I don't think I've heard this phrase, the new normal, more in my life than in the last month or so, and particularly in calls with the Philippines and conversations there. I wonder, you know, if Carol, you can give us some insights into what you imagine the lasting impact will be for your institution, for higher education, and for the Philippines. What comes from this and becomes part of normal practice, and what do we just want to get back to the old normal with?
You know, I'd say it's the new abnormal. Things would be very different from how you would normally experience things. Say when you're back to school, you know, we'll be practicing social distancing. The class sizes will be very small, but online presence, I think, is also still there. It cannot be taken away, especially in light that there's no vaccine yet. So everything is still highly dependent on digitalization of education. But the best thing here is there's a discovery, there's an opportunity. Instead of being a purely traditional university, I think a lot of universities might start thinking about having online classes or fully online programs as part of their menu. So you have at the same time running traditional lectures, and on the side, you also have your online programs delivered during the COVID times. So you have two venues or two pathways of delivering education now. Traditionally and using brick and mortar, and at the same time, you have your online digital education, which I think is very good.
Thanks. And Nick, what do you imagine? What goes back to the old normal, and what do we embed into lasting practice, do you think?
Well, I don't know if there was an old normal, because things have been changing in higher education quite a bit over the last 10 or 15 years anyway. So I think what this has done, there's two things really, one short term and one maybe a little bit more long term. So the longer term one is that we've been trying to do blended learning and push blended learning. So a mixture of online and face-to-face for quite a while. And this has sort of opened up a lot of minds and attitudes in terms of faculty to doing it, and they're interested now in doing it as well. So I think sort of, you know, the ability to push that further forward at a pace that, and a breadth and depth that wouldn't have happened otherwise is a real opportunity. The second one, more short term, is that bringing people back onto campus means that we've got to have a transition period, because there'll be people on campus, there will be people who are still overseas, and then there will be people in Hong Kong but stuck in quarantine. So we've actually sort of been configuring classrooms to actually do what we've called mixed mode. I think some people call it hybrid teaching. In other words, where you've got synchronous teaching online and at the same time students on ground in the classroom physically. So both of them learning, both groups learning together, all three groups in a sense, right? The one's in quarantine, the one's overseas, one group, and then the one's on campus. So, but we have to reconfigure classrooms a bit because of audio is the biggest issue with that. So that's in the short term. So we've been busy now for about 3 months trying to convert a number of classrooms, the way the audio works, so that can actually happen, right? So when it happens, I don't know. We'll still see. But those are the two main things.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's sort of that aligns very much with what we're hearing about the changing workplace into the future too. That more people will be choosing to continue to work remotely, work from home, and not go back. I wonder, just we've got one question from Tutu asking about the social experience and how you've maintained that social interaction that's so critical in our university environments. I wonder, maybe Carol, would you mind touching on that and what the story's been at OLFU?
Well, what we're doing right now in OLFU is getting in touch with our students, especially through webinars. So just this morning, I finished about 6 webinars talking to close to 300 students from different STEMs, from SHS all the way up to some college. And I'm trying to engage them. Tell me your fears. Tell us how Fatima can help you, and how do we realign with your dreams, and how can we push your dreams some more, and so that it would be easier for you to transition back to school. So they're very open, and they tell us that they are eager to go back to school, but they're not sure about the safety of a lot of things, whether it's safe to go back. So what we're trying to do is also assuage them of their fears, that once you're free to go back, once we're able to go back, like what Nick says, the school will be reconfigured. We're actually measuring distances among chairs, limiting the uses of our common areas. Everything is disinfected, so different. But it's good to be able to get in touch with the students through webinars and Zoom meetings and reach out to them.
Right. Well, it's a wonderful note on which to finish things, this idea of realigning with our students' dreams and pushing their dreams. Fabulous note on which to end. I just really love to thank Nick Noakes from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Dr. Carol Enriquez, President of Our Lady of Fatima University. Thanks very much to Times Higher Ed for opportunity to chat with you this evening. Thanks very much, everybody.